Shemai everyone, welcome back to the Athlete Climate Academy. We're recording today from Chamonix in France at the temporary home of the Normal Trail Running Team, which is a beautiful, hospitable, least bad smelling athlete's home that I've ever been to, which I think is great. We're joined today by two trail runners from the Normal team who are changing the way that we engage with climate change through professional sports, whether through science communication or community action. We've got Peyton Thomas, who is a researcher at the University of Colorado in Boulder studying Arctic fish. Awesome. And is now an awesome trail running athlete. And Dakota Jones, who's a fantastic trail running athlete, known for super quick times on courses like the Hard Rock 100 and his climate trail running boot camp that we first kind of spoke about, that encourages the trail running community to take action in the local area. Welcome both to the Athlete Climate Academy.
Thanks so much, Hugh. It's really nice to be here.
So let's start with you, Dakota. Like I said, the thing that we first started talking about a couple of years ago was your boot camp that encourages people to take action in the local area, which is an amazing one called Footprints Running. What was, when you first started it, what did you set it up to be, and how has it evolved in the last couple of years?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Sorry.
So, no, it's great. It's called Footprints. It encompasses most of my thought and energy, and I love it. But it's been really an interesting journey. I've always been really motivated by climate action, and I think very afraid of climate change and environmental issues in general. And I just around 2018, I really wanted to try to. Even before that, I wanted to try to find ways to address climate change through, I guess, ideally through the things that I already do, which sounds sort of self-serving when I say it like that. But I think that it's not quite so self-serving when you consider that trail running really does bring people together in a meaningful way. And I had personally experienced that both just as a runner for years, running races, but also at running camps where I'd spend a week with people. And even if it was just there for running, I really felt like we bonded with people, and it felt really empowering. And I thought maybe we can do this and use that personal empowerment for something larger. For me, that was environmental action. And so through a long process of talking to a lot of people and asking for people's ideas and advice, with many people's help, we came up with this idea of a running camp, like many others, where we all come to a beautiful place with trails, spend a week together, but it's motivated by climate action. So every person there has a climate change focused project, which they're going to apply to the community where they live. And we hire all these mentors who are experts in climate change or business practices, nonprofit leadership. Many are professional athletes, basically people who know how to mobilize a community for collective action around some sort of purpose. And we work with the campers and their projects throughout the week to develop a plan that they can then take home and implement in their community right away. It has evolved since the first year in a whole lot of ways, but I think that every year we've done this, we've been able to be a little bit more professional. We've been able to build on the successes from the previous years, improve on the mistakes that we made, and basically we're now evolving from an organization that just puts on a few events to this year-round climate action organization. We call ourselves a climate action incubator within the outdoor industry because I think that we really bring to life these projects, which can range anything from actual science-based climate action to social justice issues, all of which are connected in various ways. And so these days I work really closely with my co-founder Nate Bender in Montana, and we are trying to find ways to not only improve the events we put on, but to continue supporting the campers after the camps, and then to also find ways to provide resources outside the camps, such as working with Athlete Climate Academy.
Absolutely. And I suppose one of the key ingredients to that incubator is using scientists. And Peyton, you are, I would say, a scientist, many would. And how do you find mixing your science research and your science brain with trail running? And what's your research currently on?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different because for me, my science is really focused on the fish and aquatic ecosystems, but it is really interesting to find this connection that a lot of people don't really think about with running and just all of these different landscapes that we're going through and how this land and changes in landscapes are affecting aquatic ecosystems and vice versa, and what that feedback is. And I think it's really cool to encourage people to think outside of like the immediate area that we're experiencing, and sort of think of everything as the full ecosystem that it is, because I feel like in a lot of ways, even within the science realm, like a lot of people get really focused on their one specific organism or like one specific region, when in reality everything is interconnected. And I think it's really cool with running, like you can really tie in a lot of that interconnectivity, whether that is when you're talking about ecosystems or if you're talking about people and like broader global communities. Like we're all inherently connected with each other. And I think trail running is a great way to showcase that, because the trail running community is global.
And was that when you started, like you've got a science brain, you've got a trail running brain, were you always like, I can bring these together and I can be one brain? Or was it always like, I want to be a scientist, or I want to be an environmental lawyer, which I think you wanted to be before? Or was it bringing those two worlds together? Was it just really obvious?
I don't think it was necessarily really obvious. I think it's been sort of a journey for me to find a way to weave it together. But I also feel like there are a lot of people that I'm finding within the trail running community that are doing the same, and we're just trying to find ways to connect all of these parts of ourselves with running, because inherently, again, like everything is connected to each other. You're not necessarily separating your work or your lifestyle from each other.
I think
Yeah,
we're finding that more and more now with the climate crisis, that
totally.
we can't, people used to be specialists in flood management, people used to be specialists in droughts or earthquakes, and now there's so much happening all at the same time, that it needs scientists to come together, which
Absolutely.
isn't always super easy for scientists to talk to each other. And that's why we need, people to bring us together to do these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
So engaging in that community, how do you go about engaging people in the conversation? You're so focused on community action, and what have you learned about community action along the Footprints camp?
Yeah, so we focus on community action because I think that a lot of us, when we first start our climate action journey, we focus on individual actions, and we quickly kind of find that this isn't enough. You ride your bike to work for 10 years and the climate crisis is still continuing, things like this. At the same time, we're not all like senators in the United States government or like the leaders of gigantic corporations. We don't have massive global sway. But where we do have an influence is in the communities where we live. And that can be the actual place where you live. It could also be a more less tangible community, like the trail running community, for example. But the point is that by working at like a community level, you get to see the changes that you're implementing affecting the places and the people that you know and love best. And that is really personally empowering. And it takes like this individual action and it scales it up so more people are engaging in it. And it also proves to you that the things that you do actually matter. Because even if the things we do as individuals do matter, you rarely get to see that. And so we really focus on that community level because I think it brings out the best in people, and it brings people together in a way that helps them see, like, yeah, again, that the actions that they take really matter. So I think that, yeah, community is what we focus on the most, especially because for me, I think that when I think about climate change, I think, like, from what I understand, like, the science is understood. We know why this is happening. The solutions are pretty well understood. We know how to address this. And there's a big gulf between those two poles. And so how we connect those in my brain is by like bringing people together, improving communication, and yeah, empowering people to work together.
I think you're right. We talked before about how the scientists, we've understood climate change for a long time. We're still trying to understand the impacts of it and predict, model into the future what's going to happen. But I think the scientists' job are done in like convincing people. Like scientists have said for a long time, this is happening, and now it's down to politicians to take action, but also communities to come together and tell politicians what we want, like what we want these solutions to be. And Athlete Climate Academy, we're big believers in education is like the number one key to most things. And I love that science communication is a thing that you've been doing for a long time now. How do you tailor your science communication into to climate, and what are some of the things that you do to engage in communities in science communication?
Yeah, that's been a pretty interesting journey for me because really my first experience feeling climate impacts was also sort of entangled in the work that I was doing, living on the coast of North Carolina. I had my first big brush with like, I guess, a climate change fueled event with a massive hurricane that impacted my graduate school project, but inherently the scope of my project versus like the damage to the community that I was in, and especially like the running community, was pretty different. Like, obviously, people experienced way more loss than I did, even though that was very heartbreaking for me. But a way that I was able to initially find my way into science communication around climate was actually through that event and that personal experience that I had, which I think a lot of people felt similar experiences having gone through this same or similar natural disasters happening. And when you're talking to like people who are losing their homes or people who are losing trails that they're able to run on, it's sort of it's not the same feeling because losing your home is like obviously very damaging, but trails are also a sense of home and community for people. And yeah, especially talking to coastal communities in the Southeast, that is a pretty tangible experience that a lot of people can relate to. And then I think recently, even though I'm not necessarily the key scientist for this particular issue, but it is an issue that is really important to informing my own trail running experience, was focused on biomass production, especially in Europe, and a lot of air quality issues that are happening in the US because of this biomass production and use in Europe. And I found myself being intrigued by the science, but also wanting to understand what that is doing to communities, like people that are living in these spaces day in and day out. And I'm talking specifically about the southeastern US and wood pellet biomass production. The science itself was really interesting to me because I've always been interested in air quality issues and environmental justice issues. But the fact that it was inherently something that was directly related to my own personal experience, getting to trails, like getting to mountains. I don't know if you know anything about like the southeastern US, but if you're living on the coast, it takes a really long time to get to the mountains. It takes like 5 or 6 hours, and a lot of times you're driving through these tiny towns that like more often than not, a lot of people probably don't think about or think about the people that live there. But there are also some really unique, like beautiful places to run, even within those same spaces that you're passing through. But at the same time, that's where this wood pellet biomass production is occurring. And so, yeah, that was like just a really informative part of my experience, even just getting to trails. And I wanted to understand what is happening to the people and how we can use trail running to advocate for communities like this, and also how we can build up a trail running community in these areas. Because at least in the US, I think, well, sometimes recreation and conservation go hand in hand with each other, which is really exciting. And so I think it's cool that you can use science and environmental pollution issues that people are experiencing with some sort of recreation impetus, like trying to get people to go to certain places that maybe they haven't been before, to promote its conservation, which educates everyone and roots for communities that are often forgotten about. So all of that to say, my science communication journey through trail running has been a little bit weird, but it's exciting because I'm finding just different things that I'm passionate about and trying to advocate for.
And it definitely works because that's what Athlete Climate Academy is how can we communicate the science really well, but also use lived experiences like spending your time out in the mountains as a way of seeing that. I mean, it's just in this valley. Like a couple of podcasts ago, we had a whole podcast about air pollution along this valley, and how people burning using diesel generators and burning wood and things like that can add to air pollution. And I suppose it meets your research really well, because an environmental stressor is, if it's on a fish in the Arctic or it's on a person in the Chamonix Valley, it's still an environmental stressor, and that's something we need to come to terms with. And do you think that your studies over the next kind of decade, 2 decades, how do you see that going in how it adds to our larger knowledge of the climate problems that we'll have?
I honestly have no idea,
It's a good
but
answer.
I'm hoping I will still be working in science within the next 2 decades. But yeah, I'm hoping that I can contribute in some way to both understanding organisms that we obviously care about on some level that we're inherently connected to, but also really focusing on the human health component and how it is all related to each other. I think that's ultimately what everyone within the environmental sphere is trying to get to. What we're like finally realizing within this space is that human health and environmental health is inherently connected, and we need to be thinking about everything holistically. And so, really, just broadly, I think that is what I hope to contribute to in the future, is just fully realizing that.
And once we realize that better and we find out what we can do to adjust to it, we mentioned that climate solutions are there already, but sometimes those climate solutions, like wood pellets, seems like a good idea, and then you might realize that actually that's contributing a lot of local air pollution instead of the global air pollution that we have. So little individual actions can make a big difference, but how do we go about changing those individual actions to ones that are repeatable, and people can move from just this, I don't want to say token effort, but sometimes I feel like I'm just doing a token effort by cycling somewhere instead of driving somewhere. How can we make sure this repeatable time and again?
I think it's communication. I don't think anybody's going to repeat what you do if they don't know about it, unless by chance or something. But yeah, like I always kind of dread this kind of question because I'm in charge of a nonprofit that literally does exactly what you just asked me, and I don't feel like an expert in this. And I worry about that. I feel like I need to be, but this is the whole point of what we're trying to do, is like I don't have to be the expert, because I find the people who are the experts to help us apply that expertise. So when we have a project come to us at Footprints and they want to address something, often it is an individual action that they're trying to scale up. We do find the people who can help them with that. And for every action, there's a different project. It can be very different depending on what it is. But I really think that like communicating what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, really, it's like a brave act. You have to be vulnerable and you have to put yourself out there and say, I'm not sure how to do this. This needs to happen. What can we do? And so, I mean, you're talking about air pollution. That's a great example to talk about, because now they have the Running Up for Air series, which is from Salt Lake City, where I live, where we have a tremendously bad air pollution problem for basically the same environmental reasons that they have it here in Chamonix. They also have a Running Up for Air event here, where people run up and down these mountains for like 6, 12, or 24 hours in order to raise money for these organizations addressing air pollution issues. And so one person running up and down could raise money for this, but then by like making it an event, making it a race, it's fun all of a sudden. A lot of people are doing it. You're doing this crazy thing with other people. It brings people together in a way that talking about all the horrible effects of air pollution simply can't. We're making something scary into something fun. Hopefully. I mean, obviously air pollution is never fun, but like the event that we're doing to address it can be fun. And then it also helps people engage with this issue in a way that's not quite so scary. A lot of these environmental issues are super overwhelming, and it's just like we're constantly inundated with bad news. And if there's no way to engage with them without, I don't know, like girding your loins and being tough and just like learning everything you can, even though it hurts. I mean, if that's what you have to do to learn about this stuff, then you're not going to be able to address it. And so I guess that's kind of rambling, but when you talk about individual actions, it's just like try to get more people involved. If you're going to ride your bike to work, ride your bike with other people, share it, have a ride your bike to work day. If you're going to, I don't know, whatever it is, just like be really communicative and try to invite people to join you, because a lot of people usually want to do these things and they either don't know how or they're not brave enough to be the leader for it.
I think you're right, and it's. I want to ask in a second, are you okay? And then that's a genuine question because we were talking at lunch about how we as climate activists and climate communicators, mental health is a massive part of it. And this wasn't in my notes. It's just something that I think is super important when sometimes, and you spend your time around looking at this data, or you spend your time engaging with these communities, it's really tough to see what's happening, um, to do it day in and day out, and put yourself reading the news every single day. Carbon brief, what's going on? Oh, there's a new wildfire, there's a new drought, these people are suffering. What's happening in the global south, so far away from where I live? How do you deal with that kind of stuff? We've got about 20 minutes left. So.
Yeah, well, let's get into it. Yeah, I don't know if I deal with it super well. I think I have pretty poor mental health a lot of the time, but taking action of any kind helps me. I think that's like, there's lots of quotes, and I'm forgetting who says it, but it's just like doing anything makes you feel good about this. And this sounds like super like dark when I say it this way, but even if we didn't fix climate change and the world burned, it's like the work we're doing is right. And this is the right thing to do. And I'd rather go down with the ship like trying to fix the holes than just like giving up. But I don't think we have to get to that point. I do think that if we just keep trying, I mean, running is a perfect metaphor for this. This is why trail running is a great example. It's like you run 100 miles and you get to mile 55 or something and you feel terrible. There's a long way to go. And it's really, really overwhelming. But if you literally just keep taking one step at a time. Peyton helped me do this exact thing at the Western States 100 mile just a few months ago. I totally blew up. I had a rough race, and then Peyton paced me for the last like 20 miles, and it was like pretty grim,
Yeah.
but it was like one step at a time, and we got to the finish, and it's something I was really proud of. And I think that's something you can do with climate action. Sometimes you have to take care of yourself, put it all aside, and go do something completely different, but just doing anything is better than doing nothing.
And I like that people who are climate educators and communicators and climate scientists are the pacers for everyone else.
That's exactly right.
Dragging
Here.
everyone else along.
How do you deal with it?
Say, are you okay?
No, definitely not. Yeah, I've definitely talked to my therapist about this a lot because I feel like every single time we have a conversation, I'm like, okay, I feel like I need to do this thing and this thing and this thing. And she's like, why do you feel like you have to take on the whole entire world? But I feel like a lot of people feel like that. It's pretty common for everyone. And I agree with Dakota, like doing anything is better than doing nothing. And I feel like I can find joy in the work that I'm doing, whether that's working with fish, trying to understand future impacts on different species, or whether that's like going out and running with friends and talking to people about impacts to trails. I think anything is better than nothing, and apathy is pretty scary. It like I I can think about conversations that I've had with very apathetic people and friends, and it's just I don't know. I don't ever want to be in that place, and I want to encourage people to do more with others, because I think going back to the community aspect, that is really what I think is going to get all of us out of this apathetic, depressive state. It really just involves empowering each other. And I feel like I'm learning that every single day. So even on days when I'm like really down, I just grab a friend or I like call someone. so at least I know someone will talk to me, and that's better than nothing. So
Asking for help is critical.
it's so critical. Yeah.
And
I
also
had a time with
working
that.
within your tribe, right? Like the people that you would normally deal with, your friends, your family, the people you run with, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and I often talk about how to pick an audience for your thing, that you can't just talk about climate action with the world, because the world is very varied and there's different problems around the world. So, picking the world of trail running and outdoor sports, how can we have that effect then and talk to the people who can make a difference in outdoor sports, namely brands and races and things like that? how do we go about having that conversation with them and pushing them to be more transparent, to do more, to do anything? How do we push brands to do that?
Do you want to answer this or do you want me to answer?
You go.
I'll get it from
Okay.
both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's in every brand's best interest because also humans are behind all of these brands. And we're all reliant on each other. Every action that one person does affects another person. So I don't know if your consumers are concerned about climate impact or concerned about other environmental issues or concerned about trail erosion or something like that in your area where you're putting on races, that is definitely in a race director's, brands, whatever's interest to pursue that issue. If we're gonna get down to like the issues of capital and whatever. But yeah, it's in everyone's best interest. I don't think that anyone should not be involved in this process. Yeah, I don't know. Everyone is human. We all rely on each other.
Yeah, we do. And go back to your point, Dakota, if we try and solve the climate crisis and we accidentally, well, we fail at doing that, but we accidentally end up with better air quality, better oceans, like more better food, better clothing. Oh, how bad for us that we end up with all these extra good stuff. So what do you do when you work with brands or for profits? When it's working with non-profits, how do you think that should work? How do you think it does work? How do you do it?
Yeah, I'm learning a whole lot about capitalism lately, which is a little bit disturbing. But like Peyton says, people are behind these brands, and especially within the outdoor industry, the entire culture is based around like this obsessive appreciation for wild places and mountains and the adventures that we get to have in them. And so, operating in a manner which would prevent us from being able to do that is obviously bad for business. However, it's often bad for business in the long term, whereas like operating in like a profit like high resource use manner is better for the short term. So it's really hard to communicate around those things because especially larger corporations, they're way more profit driven. But we can start from the bottom up because every athlete I know, I think, is concerned about climate change within the trail running world for sure. Like everybody wants to take action on this, understands that this is a major issue, and the almost all the outdoor brands rely on athletes for most of their marketing, and so that's a huge way for us to communicate the importance of these issues and basically force brands to take action on this. There are organizations, hopefully Footprints is participating in this. The Pro Trail Runner organization or association is a big part of this, growing now. But also, I think that there are a lot of brands that are doing a really good job and at least trying to make a difference. Patagonia is a great example. We're here at the Normal House, which is like, for me, I think that they're genuinely attempting to try to address these issues through the for-profit sector. And as someone who operates a nonprofit, I see like its limitations see the limitations of nonprofits. We have to have for-profit companies like making a profit while like not just in spite of being sustainable, but while being sustainable. And I think that small and not so small organizations like Patagonia can really set an example for how other organizations can do that. So I guess we can support brands like that, and get involved.
Absolutely. And you mentioned we're in the Normal House for, or you've been in it for a while, we're in it for a little bit longer. And we got an engineer and a scientist, which is lovely for me to have these conversations with, by the way. What have the conversations been like around the house over the past couple of days and going forward? Has it been mostly, what time did you get on this? What's this type of shoe? How is it different to the last one? Or is it bigger questions on, it's been really hot here over the last week, or it's getting, we got another heat wave coming in towards the end of this week. A couple of weeks' time, we've got UTMB. If there's a heat wave like there's been last week and this week, what's that going to do to the people on the trail? Had any good conversations in the house? Or are you going to bring up anything going forward?
What do we talk about?
I feel like mostly we've talked about physiology,
Already.
pushing ourselves to
Yeah.
the limit. But it is interesting. I don't know. I have had some conversations with people about the heat waves, and I was following some of the Tour de France for the first time this year, and so it was interesting to hear people talk about how hot it was in these alpine areas out here, which I have no idea like what the typical climate is out here because I've never experienced this place before. So it was really interesting to hear that and then thinking about that in relation to running. I know for most people probably heat is not great for them during races. For myself personally, I love it. So I'm not too concerned, but for the larger ecosystem here and considering, yeah, everyone's adjustments to training, I can imagine that would be very difficult. And yeah, we've had some conversations around it, but it has been interesting to think about that, especially in relation to just some of the tests that we've been doing, looking at heat adaptation. And I think just thinking about that on a broader scale, when you're thinking about preparing for these races, it's like, because I study physiology in other animals, not in humans, but that's always like in the back of my mind, just understanding like evolutionary adaptation to heat tolerance. And so the same thing can be said for humans, like how will we adapt? Will certain people in certain areas adapt more than others to these changes, especially when we're going all over the world to travel to these different races? What will that look like? Not that we've had a conversation about that here, but that's sort of been in the back of my mind.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
physiology element of like physiological stress whilst in doing races.
Yeah.
Everyone will be doing, a race is a really kind of extreme example of something that people do all the time when they're outside. We talk a lot back home about shade poverty and how normally places that have less money will have less shade,
Yep.
and that's just a real problem.
Yep.
Races around the world might be through forests or might be in nicer or cooler environments closer to the coast. Will they survive longer than ones that are in deserts and the likes?
Yeah.
How long can Marathon des Sables still go whilst it's through an actual desert?
Yeah.
What kind of conversations have you had through the week and with with the people around you, with friends, with family?
Yeah, I think that a lot of like the whole DNA of Normal is built around sustainability. And it's like it's really interesting to be a part of the conversation here and to talk to people. I really like brands, and it sounds like I'm just pitching Normal, which I do work for them, so like take it with a grain of salt. But like I see this with Patagonia, I see this with other brands too. Like, we're not perfect. We're creating products that, are not necessarily essential. I mean, people do need clothes and shoes, but like trail running is also a luxury activity. But at the same time, I think that Normal is really good at acknowledging the limitations. Like we're doing this really well, we're doing this not very well. We can improve here. There's like a constant, like the way that you get better is by recognizing where you're weakest, and it takes a lot of guts, I think, for a brand who needs to make money, especially a brand new brand, to admit where they're not good and to talk about that. Patagonia does it quite well, I think, and so. Especially with the brand, I was just in Mallorca in May and working with the brand quite a lot there, which is where they're based. And, there's a ton of conversations around how we can maximize both performance and sustainability, because sometimes these things come into conflict and it's quite challenging. They're developing a shoe, which I'm apparently not allowed to talk about at all, but they're at this point now where they have this really cool shoe, which could be much more sustainable than previous shoes, but because of the way it's designed this way, it's like it's not super. It doesn't have the performance they need, and so that's where it's like actually fun. The engineering comes in. You can like be creative and be clever. Those solutions can exist. But we're constantly talking about that. I ran the Western States 100, historically a very hot race, and they had to make a whole kit for me. Well, they didn't have to, but they did make a whole kit for me for like there was less hot. It used lighter materials and was better ventilated. And it's interesting to think about the fact that that might become kind of a de facto outfit for many races, even ones that historically are not very hot.
But even de facto clothing for people,
Yeah.
predicted by the end of the century, 1 in 5 people are going to become climate refugees and moving away from the hottest environments to places that are a little bit cooler. And I think that it's something that the entire world has to come to terms with, is that the world is changing, it's changing quickly. And we can do things to mitigate that, but we live in a world where, the path was laid before us and we're walking it. But the nice thing about you guys is that you are trailblazers, and we can think about going off path and going to somewhere that's a little bit better. But as always, when you put these things, and I imagine if you're on social media, you'll have seen this before, you'll be talking about this kind of stuff, and then you guys are both from the States. I imagine you didn't cycle and swim over to Chamonix in France, so I imagine you took an airplane. And then you talk about climate change online, and then you catch a flight, and people are like, that's hypocritical. How do you deal with that kind of stuff? Does it bother you? I'm assuming the answer is yes. Going back to the "Are you okay?" question. But also, how can athletes come to terms with that kind of thing going forward?
Yeah, I feel like I learned this term pretty well from Protect Our Winners because they always talk about being an imperfect advocate, where we understand the systems that we are currently operating under, and we can't do anything to change what is or what has happened in the like energy systems that we have and the transportation that we have, but we know what will work, so we know what alternative energies we can use, and we know what to advocate for, and we still need to be able to perform, to have the sort of platforms that we have. And so I think with both of those things, it paves the way for you to be this imperfect advocate. So you're already acknowledging that these systems exist and you're just pursuing what we want for the future. I think it's all about being very honest and transparent about things that you can and can't change about the current systems and what we want to do from here. And I can choose to, like, we all inherently have a choice. I am a person who has not had a lot of opportunities to be able to like travel across the world and race in all of these beautiful places, and I still want to be able to experience that. And I acknowledge that yes, that produces a lot of emissions. I'm not doing it every single year, and it's not my fault that we operate under the current systems that we do, but I know what to advocate for. And yeah, the airline industry, for example, is changing every single day. Like there are new alternative energies that different airlines are working with, different biofuels. Like I think the time for that sort of hypocrisy to exist is narrowing. So we're getting to a future that we want to see. But yeah, I think a lot of us just have to be very transparent, and vulnerable because
Yeah.
everyone is human. Like we're all operating under the same systems. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that when people attack you for flying across the country to do a race or something or around the world, it's a really good example of the kind of infighting that plays perfectly into the hands of the people who don't want climate action to occur. Okay, we're really good at pointing out everybody else's flaws when really we all have the same values, we all have the same goals, and we have to work together. It doesn't mean we can just fly around the world and like use whatever energy all the time that we want. But as again to reference Protect Our Winter is an organization we work really closely with in the U.S. The programs director Jake Black there has he's told me, he's like, you could fly to Europe and back and you're going to use, I don't know exactly the numbers, like 1.5 tons of carbon. And that's not great. That's a large number. But if we protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from being drilled, we're going to prevent literally billions of tons from being emitted into the atmosphere. And that's an amount that is impossible for any individual to touch with their individual emissions, right? And so when I fly over here, like Peyton said, it's because I'm doing this race. It allows me to bolster this platform that I have where I can then communicate with people on a larger scale and hopefully promote collective action. So to protect things like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And if you're not a professional athlete, you still deserve to live a good life and express yourself and see the world and bring out the best in yourself. We should all reduce our individual emissions. It keeps us connected to what we're doing and why we're doing it. But we're allowed to express ourselves and to travel and to try to see the world because that makes us love the world.
Really good job. It's as if he said that before. We work on these kind of things. It's important for us to have like for our carbon handprint to be bigger than our carbon footprint, I think. Where if we travel around the world and we go to these places, it's almost as if we should go and see the glaciers that, I was up on the Mer de Glace quite recently and seeing, first time I was there was about 8 years ago, and I've seen how much is shrunk. There's even a sign now from 2015 to where it is today. And that struck me quite hard. And coming back and seeing it again and again puts it into perspective for me that, that we're having a massive impact on the environment and we need to change that. Now, every time I come back, I am using emissions to do it. But I do try my best in everyday life to have these kind of conversations. And I like that you guys, as well as going to the other side of the world to do a race, still make time to have these conversations and to increase your carbon handprint to make sure that, we're sharing the stories that we have in the normal house, that we see whilst we're out on the trails, and that we have with these conversations we can have with them, with friends and family. Peyton Thomas, Dakota Jones, thank you so much for being on the Athlete Climate Academy. I'll see you on the trail.
Thanks so much, Hugh.
Thank you. This is fun.
Yeah.